Well, we have some good news coming out of Yemen, or I guess coming out of Washington regarding Yemen. Um, One of the last things that the Trump administration did, specifically Mike Pompeo, that total salamander from the CIA who was running the State Department, he decided to declare the Houthis to be a terrorist organization. Now, as we know, U.S. designation of terrorist groups is very political in nature. I mean, terrorism is political. When they're terrorists that the U.S. likes, they're not terrorists. But when they're a group that the U.S. doesn't like, they make them terrorists. And the effect of declaring the Houthis terrorists when the U.S. is already at war with them was just to make it impossible for any sort of nonprofit group to give money or give food or any kind of aid to people living in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. And considering that Yemen is already dealing with massive famine, shortage of clean water because the Saudis and the U.S. have been bombing their food supply and their water treatment facilities for years. It's very impossible to get at this point to get clean water in Yemen. That's why so many thousands of people, tens of thousands, who knows, hundreds of thousands died of cholera because they didn't have clean water to drink. People are starving to death, and one of the I mean, it wasn't even essentially keeping them on life support, but it was making them a little less starved. People were still starving to death, but it has been, these shipments of free food from around the world from humanitarian organizations. And yes, in a lot of cases, these international so-called humanitarian aid organizations are fronts for foreign governments just trying to gain influence. But in this case, I don't think you care. I don't think you care who your food's coming from or if you're starving. And if they're trying to do it to gain influence or whatever, nobody cares about that. If you're starving, you're starving. You'll take food from whoever gives you food. But these organizations, after the Houthis were declared a terrorist organization, if they were shipping food into Houthi-controlled areas, they would be subject to sanctioning, by the U.S. government. The State Department would sanction them, just like, they sanction Iran or any of these other bad people. If the U.S., declares someone to be, essentially unpersons a group or a country, nobody in the rest of the world is allowed to do business with them, or else the U.S. says, we're going to put the kibosh on you. And the U.S. has influence over all sorts of international relations, international trade, international organizations, and so, their word carries a lot of weight. That's why if you're a country like Iran or Venezuela, and the U.S. doesn't like you, you can be cut off from the global economy. And so after Pompeo declared the Houthis to be terrorists, essentially 70% of the Yemeni population who live under Houthi rule lost, their charitable food donations from the rest of the world. Nobody was willing to send their ships there because they didn't want to face the consequences, because this was the only real effect of what Pompeo did, was he was threatening anyone who would dare give these starving people food. And, thankfully, I have to give the Biden folks some credit. Blinken finally reversed that today. Now, I was not happy, a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, when they said that they were going to create a commission to study the issue. I said, oh, that's great. That's where everything goes in Washington to die. It goes to a committee. Just like after Reagan got into office, he decided to create a commission to see if getting back to the gold standard was a good idea. And of course, the majority opinion was that, well, no, obviously, you could never go on a gold standard. That's reactionary nonsense. And the minority opinion was ghostwritten by Murray and Rothbard. So I assure you that, the majority didn't win their argument on the merits. And so these commissions are a sham. It's a way of, of government saying, hey, we're going to consider all sides here, and, but their minds are made up to begin with. But in this case, they didn't just create this commission and then we never hear about the issue again. They actually are supposedly tomorrow are going to revoke their status as terrorist organizations, which will open the floodgates for food to pour back into Yemen. Now, all this does is essentially get us back to things being as bad as they were, like, at the end of 2020, which, in December 2020, Yemen was still a really, really bad place. Now, it's just made worse by Pompeo cutting off the little trickle of food supply that they had coming in, but, this is not going to save the country by any sense. It's going to save a lot of lives, though, apparently. According to the UN, they said that, if you didn't get food, 400,000 people, or 400,000 children under the age of 5, I think they said, would starve. And starve to death, over the course of 2021. And typically, these death things, whether they're overestimated or underestimated, it really depends on, who's doing the estimates. But needless to say, you have this population that is either starving or on the brink of starvation. You cut off just a little bit of their food, let alone a ton of their food, you're going to have a lot of people starving to death. And that's a gruesome, terrible way to die. Cholera is also a terrible way to die. I don't want to describe how you die of cholera. You can Google it if you want, or if you know what cholera is, you'll know it's not good. And of course, it's the young and the old who suffer from that the most. Just imagine that being how your grandparents or your children meet their end. It's horrifying. And so the Biden administration is a long way from ending the war in Yemen. I don't have much confidence in the actions they've taken so far. They said, okay, we're going to end support for aggressive action. But what exactly does that mean? To me, the standard that they've set on how they will disengage from this, it's a slightly less aggressive stance than the Trump administration. But I don't know how it's that different from the Obama administration stance, which was, when the war started. Obama's the one who started the war. So I would say we're by no means, I guess, in the green as far as the Biden administration goes. They have not made the situation much better. They've just made it slightly less worse than it was a few weeks ago. And so the longer that this continues, the more blood will be on Joe Biden's hands. And of course, the more blood will also be on the hands of Lloyd Austin, who, in his time serving as a general, was allied with the Houthis, worked directly with the Houthis. And so I don't, if he worked with them, he's as guilty, if you want to say it, as the people, he's much more guilty than the average people living under Houthi rule in Yemen who are being victimized by this war. If the people in Yemen deserve their fate, if they deserve to starve to death, if they deserve to die of cholera, well, then I think that Lloyd Austin is even more deserving of that, because those people just happen to live close to the Houthis. But Lloyd Austin, he was an accomplice of the Houthis, helping them hunt down Al-Qaeda in Yemen. As Dave Smith is wont to say, if you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Well, back in 2014, 2015, we were implicitly funding the Houthis by helping them, target Al-Qaeda, who was was our mutual enemy. We were helping them, and come, whatever part of 2015 when Saudi Arabia says, no, we want to start killing the Houthis, Obama switches sides and says, hey, Al-Qaeda, remember us? We're your buddies now. And the Houthis are our enemies. And Al-Qaeda said, okay, America, we're going to go fight for you. It's satanic. There's no level of honor in any of this. It's evil on multiple levels. If I were Joe Biden, I would be on TV, almost crying, begging for forgiveness for the evil that I was an accomplice to, and so should everyone else, because these people who are working in the Biden administration now, they worked, most of them in the Obama administration too. They were complicit in the destruction of Yemen, which was already the poorest country in the Middle East. Joe Biden, just because he wasn't president, doesn't get a pass. Because, if you're the VP, you have a pretty strong pull over the president. He should have done everything he could to make sure Obama didn't do this. And if Obama didn't listen to him, Joe Biden should have resigned in protest and said, I will not be a part of this. And he should have blown the whistle on it and said that this is evil. Because it is. And so no one's clean when it comes to Yemen. Not Obama, not Trump, not Biden, none of these folks. The Yemen war is the worst thing to happen in the world since the Iraq war. Okay? That's saying something. And frankly, it might be worse by this point. Who knows? The Yemen war has been going on a long time. So, I mean, eventually they're going to bump up against Iraq's death count. We never really know truly how many people die in these things, but we know it's a lot. And we know that they're dying in very gruesome ways. These are not combat deaths. Because this is not a light war. This is total war. And in total war, most of your deaths do not come from combat. Just think about World War II. Where did your deaths come from then? It was from bombing, civilian targets. It was from the Holocaust. It was from the Japanese massacring civilians in China. I believe that was the biggest death toll where that came from. But then again, you also had, the Soviets, I think most of their deaths were combat related because they were just sending anyone and everyone to the front lines, armed with whatever they had to try and, right into Hitler's buzzsaw. And I guess not an unforced reference to the MG42, but literally, the buzzsaw of the Wehrmacht. That's way off topic. But the point is, war is hell. Everyone knows that. And anyone who is complicit in perpetuating a war that has no reason. I mean, this isn't an example of me being some, bright-eyed and naive young person thinking, I just don't understand, broader geopolitics and why this war is going on. If it was as simple as ending it, somebody would have done that. No, it is that simple. Everyone who looks into this realizes that there's no point to be at a war in Yemen. 99% of Americans don't even know it's going on. They have no idea what kind of inhumane slaughter our government has been a part of. And anyone who finds out about it is instantly enraged. That you could not have a less popular war, just if people knew about it. The only reason why it's not so unpopular is because the media has done a lot to conceal it, cover it up. But if Biden really wanted to become popular, when he's, nobody buys that he has a 60% approval rating, what he should do, come out and be the most anti-Yemen war president ever. I mean, you can even keep all your wars everywhere else, Joe. Increase the amount of troops in Afghanistan. But if you end the Yemen war, I mean, it's going to be hard for people to get mad at you about that. Go ahead, make whatever Republican neocons, want to try and be the voice of the opposition, I guess, who would still be a neocon at this point, who wants to run against Biden? Tom Cotton? I guess Tom Cotton. Let Tom Cotton go on TV and defend the slaughter of civilians. Make him do that, Joe. But he won't, and that's because Joe Biden condones the slaughter of civilians too. He is an accomplice to it. He's a party to it. And my guess is that he feels very little remorse about the slaughter that he helped unleash in Iraq. The Iraq War would have never happened without Joe Biden. He was the chairman of the Senate, now I forgot the name of the committee. Armed Service? No, it wasn't the Armed Services Committee, was it? Maybe it was the Foreign Relations Committee. But anyway, when the war proposal, the authorization to use military force, when that was coming up through Congress, it had to make it through his committee, and he was a bulldog defending that thing. He did not allow any sort of dissent. The committee hearings were a joke. Joe Biden very much wanted that war to go through, and it did. It got through because of Joe Biden. If Joe Biden had stood against it, he could have stopped it. Joe Biden was in a very powerful position regarding the Iraq War. Remember, the Senate was controlled by Democrats at that time. And then, lo and behold, his good son ended up being killed by the war. And not in combat. He died because of cancer that he got from inhaling fumes at a burn pit, supposedly. A burn pit in Mosul, I believe. Not that I want to get into the whole burn pit controversy about, the U.S. military. You can look into that if you want, but, Joe Biden is pretty directly responsible for the death of his good son, the one who wasn't a crack addict. And I don't know how, as a man, you just go on with yourself without reflecting on that at all, without even talking about it. If I were Joe Biden, even if I had done everything up in his life that had happened until his son died, to me, the realization that I killed my own son by starting a pointless war, by lying about it for, at the time, political points, I don't know how I would live with myself, but the only way I would be, if I ran for president after that, that would be my whole campaign, would be, I'm sorry, and I want to make sure that something like this never happens again, and run on the Yemen war. and say that, hey, since my son died, I'm a changed man, and I realize now that this is evil, and we need to stop this. And I don't want any more people to lose their sons and daughters. That should have been Joe Biden's campaign. If he had any ounce of a soul, he should have taken the death of his son as an opportunity. And frankly, if he had a heart, this would have happened anyway. This wouldn't be just pure Machiavellian politics, although you could take it from that perspective if you want. If he was a smart politician, he could have done this too. He could have taken that and said, you know what, this is wrong. Trump is not ending this. Trump ran on ending these wars. He's not. Yes, this was a war I was a part of. In the Obama administration, I didn't do enough to oppose it at the time. Yes, I might have been, against it behind closed doors, but I didn't make a big enough stink about it. But now I am, and if Trump won't end it, I will. And if you really want to be the decency candidate, that's about the best way you can do it. Instead of saying that Trump has mean tweets, make the case that Trump is killing innocent children and old people and just innocent people in general by supporting Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not popular on the left or the right in the United States, and killing people also is not popular. And thanks to the last couple of decades, the Iraq War, the War on Terror, and all that, war is not popular. So that was a long tangent, but it needed to be said. You have to put this sort of stuff into perspective once in a while to remember that the people in Washington who occupy positions of power are not good people. They're fundamentally bad people. And if they were in any way decent people, they would be very, very different. They would have led very, very different lives. And if they ever, had a change of heart, they would be taking very, very different actions now. The folks in Washington are not just bad people because of what they've done in the past. They're bad people because of what they're actively doing right now. I would offer any of them forgiveness if anyone in a position of power just decided to turn around and say, you know what, I've used my power for evil for all this time, and now I'm going to try and use it for good. I wouldn't even care, because if they could just save a few 100,000 lives, which is a drop in the bucket these days, considering the amount of death that our government unleashes, I'd be happy. If they just had a genuine Walter Jones style come to Jesus moment. Walter Jones was a congressman who supported the Iraq War, and then later on realized that it was horrible and evil and needed to stop. And he wrote letters of apologies to the families of dead soldiers to atone for his vote. Now, had Walter Jones opposed the Iraq War, would he have been able to stop it? No, but he still felt guilty for having supported it. Joe Biden, on the other hand, plenty of other people in Washington back then, they would have been able to, by themselves pretty much, been able to derail this. And that's true of so many other wars. These wars don't just go on by themselves. They're not, self-perpetuating. They continue to go on because people choose to continue them. And so while removing the Houthis from the terror list, re-enabling charitable organizations, to donate food to 70% of the Yemeni population, that's a start. But, really, that is, it's nothing. It's a gesture at this point. None of these people deserve a pat on the back, certainly. It's too little too late. It's so little that it's something that, when Pompeo did it, he was just adding insult to injury. These people were already starving. He just essentially, was putting the final nail in their coffins. And I guess the Biden administration decided to pop a couple of those nails out of the coffin. But they have in no way liberated these people from the risk of imminent death. So I think that's about all I have to say in this matter for today. If you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.